if you get 6 perfect brands, you don't have a gap anymore.
Last time we talked about the Japanese anime Sarazanmai, and we dived quite deep into what it meant and opened a lot of drawers, ideas for reflection. And so the main thing that I got from talking to a couple of listeners is that they hadn't seen Sarazanmai, and they actually tried, but what bothered them was the repetition. You know how there is this pattern of this typical monster of the week episode structure where you have the good guys fighting the bad guy of the week, and yeah, I argued with them about that. What do you think about that?
It bothered me as well. Like the first few episodes, you're like, it seems like a very normal, albeit a bit weird, but kind of normal anime that is a bit boring. Like the first 2 to 3 episodes are a bit boring, kind of following like a shonen pattern. So I can understand that like they're a bit bored by it. And also, if you don't get that the weirdness come with like symbolism is something that the author won't say, and you just think it's a weird anime, then I think it can just get boring and like.
If you're only looking at it literally.
Yeah, exactly.
But this repetition serves a purpose, right? It's a depiction of a broken system, the inertia, like they are stuck in their own routine. And that is what, like, I'm pretty sure the director does that very consciously on purpose. And you can tell because it's actually, even though it looks very similar, it's actually not recycled animation. The policeman dance, for instance, is different every time.
Yeah.
So I think he really consciously builds up this routine and this boredom, like this feeling of people that are stuck in this cycle, so that he can break it later on. But I understand that it's not the most fun things to see.
Yeah, and like it might be interesting and important. I don't think the anime would have much chance without it. But the thing is, I do think that it could have been 1 or 2 episodes, maybe a bit longer episode, showing like 2 or 3 routines without going into that much details. I mean, for example, if you do play like the Tiny Parable at the beginning, you're kind of trapped for like 3 minutes, and you actually feel trapped, and you don't need to feel trapped more than that. And like you just like feel it, and you're like, okay, good. Like I get it. Like I get the setup. Now let me play the thing. I don't think you need to actually feel like the character.
I guess it is a good point. It's probably one of the hardest fine-tuning to do as an artist, as a creator. And it's true that the Stanley Parable pretty much nailed it. And maybe Sarazanmai didn't as much. So I have another point that comes from a conversation I was having with Zizek fans. So do you know Slavoj Žižek?
No.
Oh, you love that guy. He is kind of like an internet celebrity at the same level as Jordan Peterson. Kind of like one of these. Slavoj Žižek, yeah. He's a Romanian psychoanalyst and philosopher.
Okay.
He's Lacanian, of course. He studied in Paris 5, maybe, one of the Paris universities. And so he's really, really into Lacan, obviously. And his particularity is that he mixes Lacan and sociopolitical commentary. His big thing is ideologies. And so it fits very perfectly with what we were talking last time about Sarazanmai and the boxes, etc. So one textbook example of Zizek's essays is comparing this objet petita to... He has 2 main examples, the Coca-Cola-ness of Coca-Cola, or the surprise inside Kinder Surprise. And so his whole point is that the socio-political, economic complex around you is very focused at exploiting this object petita gap. And so essentially, if I want to sum up really quickly, what he says is that like the reason Coca-Cola is so important as a brand is because it is constituent of your identity as an answer to the filling the gap of object petit a. And yeah, so it's a very nice parallel to this Kappa box.
I'm not sure I understand. Like, so the cokeness of Coke do what?
I should have rewatched some Zizek to prepare for this. But essentially, when you advertise Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
you don't really care about the product or even the image. You care about idealized conceptualization of happiness that speaks directly to the gap that is missing in people.
Because there's a brand theory. It's like depressed me that I know that, but like there's a brand theory calling like different brands with like different categories of brand. And so Coke is it's 6 different colors. So like there's brown brand,
This
yellow
is the hardest one
brand,
to pronounce.
whatever, like red brand. And Coke is like a brown brand because like it makes you happy and you feel at home basically, and so it projects that outside, and like they create like this whole like Christmas thing and etc. So it makes you feel good. And like there's other brand, like I don't know, red brand would be like Red Bull because it projects like power, it projects sports, it projects like that sort of thing. And you also need that sort of like feeling, so you can buy like this brand, you can feel like belonging and stuff like that. Would be a yellow brand like United Color of Benetton, stuff like that. So I think what you would say is that this 6 color of brand would be 6 side of object petit a maybe. And if you get 6 perfect brand, you don't have a gap anymore.
That's reasonable. How many episodes are there with boxes with secrets? We could have estimated that. But yeah, so this whole consumerist spectrum of this whole consumerist angle on Lacan is really cute to think about in perspective with Saraz and Mai, and maybe we should have thought a bit more about that. Today's sponsor is shops. Shops are places where you can trade currencies for goods. There is a wide variety of shops for everything you may need. So if you ever feel like exchanging currencies for goods, drop by one of the shops. By the way, I meant to tell you that I fulfilled a long-lasting to-do to get to know a little bit more about Banksy.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I heard his name here and there, but I actually didn't know much about what he did, and there's a frightening amount of stuff I don't know anything about. But anyway, I watched. Well, my main source of information was the movie Exit to the Gift Shop. Do you know it?
No.
So there is no Banksy movie, and like he's very secretive about his image. But there is a documentary about a French guy who got to know him and got very close to him by being very persistent.
What do you mean persistent?
So this is the story of this French guy who is a bit weird, a bit obsessed, and his obsession is filming everything in his life all the time. I think it might be like a little clinical, like an actual problem, and that they do tackle that in the movie. But anyway, so he films everything all the time, and he gets into street art and tagging through his cousin. And so he wants to film everything about street art, all the street artists, and he wants to film Banksy. And by a strike of luck, he was at the right place at the right time when Banksy needed a man Because filming everyone, he got contacts, and one day in LA, he was in LA filming just whatever, and Banksy needed a man to do a delivery or whatever on last minute. So through these contacts, they met, and he turned out to be pretty reliable and dedicated, obviously, because he's completely obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
And so he filmed, and Banksy thought it was a good idea to document a little bit the atmosphere and the goal of his work. So it's the story of how they met, how they worked together, and how eventually Banksy realized that this guy was a little bit sick, probably.
Yeah, no kidding.
And got rid of him by financing, giving him essentially an exhibit.
Okay.
That was a smash hit. An exhibit. I mean, the quality of the exhibit is debatable because art is, but so it's a lot of mass-produced stuff, and he completely like overbuilded it up so that it's mostly like fame and people come and end up appreciating it. And it reminded me a lot of the London #1 restaurant on TripAdvisor that you showed me. So you probably should introduce it. And
Okay, I need to introduce two things. Because so there's this video about TripAdvisor, like a fake restaurant going into like the first rank of TripAdvisor restaurant in London. But also I've just watched a video, literally just before this episode, about a girl that do a fake art exhibition in London. So what she does is like she just buy canvas and ask all of her friends that are not artists to like paint shitty abstract painting. And then like do an actual exhibition around like this shitty painting, and she actually sold 7 paintings.
Okay, but how does she bootstrap it? Because you need connections to make to seem serious.
Apparently not really. Like you just can rent a place, like rent an art exhibition, and then like
and people just assume okay, well, she has the money to rent a place for starters. That's
so she has the money to rent a place, she has the money to do flyers, she put flyers like everywhere on the street, and she's a YouTuber, so I guess she has some connection because she has like 1 million subscribers.
But I do prefer the example of the TripAdvisor restaurant because they really literally came from nothing, right? They made a fake page, left reviews, just declined everyone on the phone, and it kept growing and growing. It was almost not on purpose. But that was a very interesting story.
What do you mean not on purpose?
Well, I don't think he set out to be the #1 restaurant on TripAdvisor. He set out to see how far he could go.
Yeah. Well, he wanted it to be the first one.
He seemed like it went beyond his expectations.
Yeah. All of his videos, this guy, I can't remember the name of this guy, but all of his videos are like that. It's like, okay, let's take shitty jeans and make it to like the Paris Fashion Week. I don't know, like just 4 videos like that. Like, oh, it just feel like today's, if you fake it enough, it always work. What was interesting about the fake art video is that you can argue that it's actually an art installation. Like the whole thing is like each piece is not art in itself, but like the actual thing is an art installation. And well, the girl didn't really think it through. Like I don't think that was the purpose at all, which is interesting because you can then argue that like if the intent was not art, yeah.
About the art and intent, yeah. But that's the thing, like none of these examples are conscious commentaries on fake it until you make it. Maybe the TripAdvisor guy, but I think these are amazing works of postmodern art. And that's why like I really like what Banksy did, but compared to all this other stuff, like I think he could go further in denouncing the hypocrisies of the system like that TripAdvisor guy did. Because so one thing I wanted to ask you, because I noticed that often during parties or debates, one thing that drives you crazy is when people are expressing some kind of inconsistencies. Like they said A, and a few minutes later they are implying non-A. And like, fair enough, I hate that too. But I wanted to dig a little bit into why is that a problem? Because I've had a lot of discussions that like ended like that, essentially, like, oh, you're just inconsistent, so I can't handle it. I don't know where to go from there. You're saying two different things, and that's very topical when it comes to current American politics. Let's not go into details of like what actual content is, but why is logical consistency, like, what's the value, the inherent value of logical consistency, essentially, is what I want to ask you.
That's easy.
Why does it drive you insane when people don't?
So I think like the first thing and maybe the most obvious answer to that is you can't have a discussion without being consistent. And that shows where, like, in a simple sentence, it just, the thing is with the human brain, I don't think we're made to be super consistent. We're not logical being right at the bat. So we're pushed into being logical by language. And so we force being logical, but we are actually like not a logical species. But the thing with language is it forces us to be consistent for it to make sense. And language is based on being consistent. The only problem is we don't have a perfect memory of what we're saying. So it pushes us to not be consistent. So like in a debate, you can say something. After 10 sentences, you just forgot that like you were telling that thing. So you became inconsistent. And the thing with debate is that usually what happens is the opposite parties is more focused on what you're saying. So you actually see that like the inconsistency more in a debate format than in a normal conversation format. But I don't think being inconsistent is super... You can live without being 100% consistent. And I think that, for example, it can be a problem to be 100% consistent and you can not be. Like if you take The Good Place, is that like it shows exactly that. Like you can be consistent. Like, so spoiler alert for the second season of The Good Place. Like, they go to hell based on the system, and the system is you always go to the bad place, because even if you're super consistent with being good, you always do bad stuff in our current system because the system is too complicated. So you can't be, right now in our world, if you want to be 100% consistent, you can't do shit because...
The Good Place was really nice at highlighting the fact that everything has unintended consequences, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them, and mostly bad.
So to go back to the first point, like, I don't think you can be 100% consistent, and I don't think we should even aim for that. I think it would be insane.
So you're saying that human nature is like essentially inconsistent, and that even if you're trying to be consistent, like in highlighted by this great example of The Good Place, it's harder and even impossible because the world is too complicated. So in The Good Place, they show that it's impossible essentially to be good, to like want to do good things and to do good things. But you can still be consistent in your intent based on your limited knowledge, because it's impossible to know all the ramifications and all the bad things. But where does intent come into this?
I mean, if we take the Good Place example, I don't agree with you because you can't be consistent with your intent. Meaning, your intent is, I don't want to kill people. And you know, if like you're just, or you don't want to know, but like don't want, it's already not being consistent. Meaning you can Google search anything and you know something. It's just...
So I guess a perfect consistency with a strong intent, like a perfect intent, implies getting the knowledge to realize the intent. So you'd have like this is how you wash away this problem of imperfect knowledge.
Well, in 2019.
Yeah, okay.
In 2019, like in 1500, clearly it's not the same thing, but right now we have Google. Google kill us.
This is probably a topic for another. Well, I don't know. Like information is too much information killing us.
I think
no, but like, is it the topic of another episode or of this episode?
we don't need to deep dive into it right now, but it's less possible to be consistent now with what you believe. Now that you have perfect information always. Like access to perfect information always.
The accessibility of information will ruin every illusion of consistency you may have. So it's even
exactly.
like from before we said like we're born inconsistent, it's impossible to be consistent, and now even when you think you believe even when you think you're consistent, like Google a quick Google search shows you that it's not even the case.
Yeah.
So in this very postmodern world, we can go to the next step.
That was fast. In 10 minutes, we removed every hope of consistency.
Oh yeah, I mean, we are 2019. Everything is postmodern. Everything is relative.
Oh my god.
But
okay.
yeah, relative consistency.
But let's go back to a micro level. So at a macro level, at a human life level, like it's not possible. Let's move on to a micro level of like debating and like or just actually a statement. For taste and like for things like that, I think it's not that important, and you don't actually need to be consistent. Like who the fuck cares if you prefer A over B over C? I think what's important is like in language, like when it comes to language and like talking to a person, then you need to be aware that you can be inconsistent and try to remove the inconsistency of when you're talking, because if you're not consistent with what you're talking, you don't make sense. Like it's the base of communication, and I know that like we can't really talk about Trump, but I think we still can a bit.
I mean, yeah, I think we can say neutral things. we can probably very neutrally point out some inconsistencies.
Yeah, I think so as well. And so when Trump is one of the most inconsistent public figure in the public space right now.
It's a good example, and I think it's fair and honest and unbiased to say that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, he ran in 2000, he ran for president on the premise of giving free healthcare. Like, 16 years later, he's running the most conservative agenda ever in the States. So right at the bat, like the political set is completely inconsistent with himself. And the problem with that is then to agree with him, you need to remove any kind of logical critique of like what you're saying. And you just need to agree with him at a character level, meaning at a personal level.
What does that mean? Because you agree with a statement, and if you have two opposite statements...
No, that's the thing.
Do you mean that completely removes the form, the content of the statement, and that completely put the emphasis on the form?
Completely.
But how can you agree with the form? Isn't agreeing saying like, oh I think your statement is correct?
But not really though, because like you can see that with the opposition. When you see the Democrats trying to be against Trump, you can see that they don't know how to do that, because you have a guy that like don't care about consistency at all. And so what Democrats do is they come at a very logical point of view. They're like, yeah, this won't work because A, B, C, D. So they're very logical and they put their point. And Trump is completely the opposite. He's like, meh. And so people that trust Trump they agree with him at a very basic level, but like what he's just saying is let's be patriot, but then like he's not consistent with anything else. He's just like, even in the same sentence he can like remove consistency. He can say I didn't do it, and the sentence just after that is yeah, I did it, but that was not a problem. So I don't like, he speak at a very intuitive level. He doesn't really care about meaning. He only care about the emotion that goes with what he's saying.
Okay.
And I think it's a very weird way to like interact with like someone. The struggle with being inconsistent is you can't change your mind, because right at the bat your mind is not set. Like it just like it makes no sense.
Because there's no mind, there's no point, there's no thesis in the argument.
Yeah. So you can't you can't destroy it.
That could be seen as a plus. I mean, in a way, you can say you're transcending the debate by taking an absolute position that is sure to be successful.
Yeah, but that's the problem though, because
it's unfalsifiable by definition. So, but the problem is that it kills communication. That's what you said. So the main problem of inconsistency is that it is impossible to communicate, essentially.
I would like to give a warm thank you to our sponsor, Redundancy. Redundancy is a world-famous method to get your message across. Thanks to its repetitive character, redundancy will surely make your message something no one can forget. This is why redundancy is already used all around the globe by leaders in advertisement to get messages across. It really is a surefire way to make yourself heard. So if you ever have a point that you want made, consider redundancy. Redundancy.
To sum up what we said that consistency is not innate, it takes an effort, and the point we reach is that it's more or less essential to quote unquote make sense, to have a conversation and a debate, to exchange ideas. I don't know. That's the point that is still unclear to me. Like, what is the point of making sense? Why is it important to make sense?
no, that's a good point. Why do we need to make sense? That's a good question, and I think it comes from like literally where we come from as like a species. Like, I don't think hunter-gatherer were debating if it was important to make sense. I think they cared about how to put salt in their meat to keep it for like 3 days instead of one.
Yeah, but then you have already debates about the two experiments that this guy puts a pinch of salt and this guy put two, and then they have to agree on experimental results to see which is the best way.
Apparently, no. Apparently, this hasn't happened that like quick at the human species level. Like, we figure out the scientific method in like 1500. Before that, we were not consistent human being. Like, we just were not. We didn't know science before. Like,
yeah, it's all a matter of science and rationality.
I think so. I think we invented being consistent as a way to progress, like not so long ago, like 500 years ago.
In a way, it's kind of like science, but for conversations.
And that's the point. Like, you can live without being consistent, and that's why people do it, because it's less taxing on their human. It's like taxing on their human pet. It's less taxing on their brain resources, obviously, because, as we said, like, it's not innate, so we need to like actually do a process of being consistent. And it's taxing because you need to memorize like what you're saying, you need to memorize like your belief, and you like, so it's like taxing, which I can argue it's not, because if you're always consistent, you don't need to like, it's like being honest. Like, you don't actually need to think about the direct consistency if you always say the same thing. Then, like, the consistency can always be at the first level.
Yeah, but you have to align all your beliefs at some point, and that's hard because belief is quite an open-ended set.
So that's one of the things that like I try to do for a long time now, to align like everything that I think with a formal level of consistency. It's can be like, I don't think it's a good way to. I think it's good for me because I'm a bit obsessive. I don't think I wouldn't push that to everyone. Meaning, it's taxing, it's a bit useless, and like, it makes you realize shit that are completely useless. Like, ooh, I don't know, sometimes in a debate I can like have a point and then figure out that it's not consistent with another point that I just made, and I can't continue my point. I'm just like going back.
You have to reevaluate your whole life.
Yeah, exactly. You need to reevaluate everything for a small. The thing with being 100% consistent at a conversational and belief point of view, like standpoint, is that even a small mistake can destroy a big belief that you have. So, for example, a big belief that I have is, I don't know, like let's invent something. I don't like the color blue.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a big belief. The only problem is I love blueberries. So that's inconsistent. But should I remove that big belief or I hate the color blue because I like blueberry? Or should I just say I don't like blueberry anymore, which isn't true with like what I like at a taste level?
Or should you embrace your inconsistency?
Or you embrace your
but
inconsistency.
we said we shouldn't do that for progressing in language and blah blah blah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I think like there's a level of consistency that we should keep, but at the same time, I'm not even sure that we should aim to be 100% consistent.
And we said it's impossible anyway. But so, how would you advise in real life to address a conversation with someone that's not being logical?
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah, let's go into a bit of a practical part.
Yeah, life advice.
Life advice.
Save me, Vlad Senpai.
So I wouldn't like. So the thing with me is I don't mind talking about the same thing for hours. Like it's just something that I don't mind doing, and I don't mind also spending hours explaining the same shit to someone that just don't understand. So the first thing is I think like something that you just can't do. It's like just a personality. Is you need
You need to like it.
like you need to yeah exactly you need to like trying to push consistency to someone. But the second thing also is to push.
But have you ever tried to push consistency in itself, or do you keep focusing on the actual content of the conversation? Like, do you ever say, oh, let's take a step back? Do we want to make sense?
So that's useless because people don't think about their statement as inconsistent. No one think that. Like, and at a debate level even more because like they want you to like change your point of view. So they won't, usually people won't say, oh, sorry, I was being consistent, even if you point it out. So I don't think just saying like, let's take a step back, like what's consistency and blah, blah, blah would work because no one think of themselves as being consistent being. And they, yeah.
Okay.
So that doesn't work. What I do when I debate with someone that is not that consistent is I use their inconsistency against what they're saying. Meaning, I'm saying, okay, let's take this second fact, even if it's not true and consistent, let's take that second fact as true, and then you push the logic further. And usually what happens is everything crumbles because it's not consistent to begin with. But the thing is like the first inconsistency is not that obvious because no one makes obvious inconsistency. Like people think of that as a constant being, so they don't say I like orange and 2 sentences after I don't like orange. Trump does, but normal human beings don't. So what my maybe only advice is when someone is being inconsistent and you spot it, it's actually not to tell them that it's inconsistent. It's like, okay, let's take that point and let's push it as far as we could. And like then the inconsistency is completely obvious. It never works though. Like I like doing that. It never works because then people will say, oh, you're pushing it too far.
Over rationalize. Oh, yeah.
And then people don't like you pushing their idea too far because they don't
want to be exposed to logical. Yeah.
They don't care about consistency, basically. Yeah, they don't care. Like, and at that point, like you go back. Like and that's why like it takes hours and like usually it's useless, meaning you don't convince them of shit.
But you're saying that they don't care about consistency. I think this is the biggest point for me, that the goal of the conversation is not to make sense if they don't care about consistency.
No, the goal of the conversation is usually to push you to believe something.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I really think it's because of how we're taught at school that people don't really want to change their point of view.
Oh yeah, because the whole thing about like, oh, there is one right answer and that's what you're supposed to learn is very passively damaging for anything.
And I think like you can learn it like on like late in your life. Like I mean, I was not. When I was younger, like before I was, 20, I was really not a person that say like, I'm wrong, you're right, like you convinced me. I've changed completely in the last like 7 years.
You need to
But
train
like, yeah,
it.
literally, like logically, I saw that in myself. Like I was like, okay, when I debate, I never agree with like the other guy. I need to work on that, and I need to not care when I'm wrong, and that worked. I mean, like you can work on that. You can see yourself, check on yourself. Okay, like am I being logical? Like is that debate? Like also about debating. I think the important part is you need to have a debate with something that like you can change your point of view on. If you debate on some things that you're sure you won't change your point of view, then it's a bit useless. And you know that the other guy usually don't want to change their point of view and are not open to change their point of view. But if you're a consistent person, you can change your point of view on anything. You can make me believe that like there's a unicorn in the world. Like I'm open to that conversation. Maybe there is. I don't know. Like I will argue that like there's no unicorn, but if you show me proof, like why not?
Peer-reviewed literature.
Yeah. Well, I don't really. Yeah, it needs to be a good peer review literature because there's a lot of
Yeah.
shitty one. But so yeah, I just think people need to be more. I think being consistent comes with being open to any kind. It's being agnostic about the world.
And being open to new ideas.
The good thing with being consistent with yourself is that you can change. Okay, so leave us comments on all the Reddits.
All of them, but mostly notdailypodcast.com. Or Twitter us at notdailypodcast or notdailypodcast@gmail.com.
And thanks a lot for listening.